Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and remembering to put their clocks back this week is Lucy Newberger, John Gibbs, and Brent Poland. Looking after us all in the background is Leanne Lex. So is everybody on holiday or some form of downtime and taking it easy? Good,
oh, yeah.
good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we are all hot foot from a top secret 5-star location in one of the world's capitals where TTR held its Halloween staff do. In fact, it's still ongoing. We all had to leave early. Turns out it was something of a damp squib, as health and safety told us we were not allowed to play pin the tail on the donkey. Apparently it's cruelty to animals. And the visually challenged person's slight nudge is contrary to the anti-bullying policy, apparently. But I am pleased to say that I did win the Dunking for Apples game with the assistance of Lucy, who really needs to learn the difference between that game and waterboarding. But the advantage of having a haircut like this is you can dry it very quickly. Anyway, enough silliness. We will be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
Now, an article that caught my attention this week is an investigative piece by Lucas Komisky. And it's really about disadvantaged schools having a much more difficult task in basically doing their day-to-day work, really. The things that they have to cope and manage with mean they lose money, they have difficulty employing teachers, and so on. Brent, one of the principals Lucas spoke to says is that schools like his regularly advertise a job maybe 4 times to get, and I'm quoting him here, 1 decent applicant. What's going wrong with the system then, and we can't get a supply of decent teachers?
Well, it's the market, isn't it? Thatcher's 101. It's what you've done to education and privatized it. If you take the disadvantaged school as a failing business, do you want to go work for a failing business? Or would you rather work for a successful business? And that's just exactly what it is. It's just market forces. It's demand and supply. Teachers now realize that with their economic worth, well, they've turned us into economic worth. We used to be not economic worth. It used to be the things we couldn't measure. But now, okay, it's about economic worth. You wanted market forces, you got market forces. Congratulations. This is what we have earned. This is the way our education system is. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the disadvantaged get more disadvantaged. I mean, I don't say that investigative journalist. I'm sure it looks like a really good piece of work. He wouldn't have had to investigate very much, because common sense would dictate, a simple understanding of economics would dictate, and anybody who's worked in education knows that basically it's running to the hills. I've never known as many of my colleagues who are talking about going into the private sector because, well, let's be honest with you, they're paid more, they're appreciated a lot more. Yes, there's disadvantages to that when it comes to time, but why would you want to work for a business that is failing? So therefore, why would you be attracted to a school that is failing? And what really upsets me about this is that those schools actually need more resources. They need those teachers. They need the best teachers. They need the most motivated teachers. They need more to undo the disadvantage of 14 years of austerity and the funding cuts, the NHS cuts, the CAMS cuts, everything that's been done to those schools. And then the Ofsted come in. Instead of Ofsted coming in and supporting those schools, they condemn them, they destroy them, the head teachers leave. Then the hard-working teachers who are invested in those communities are driven out by some soulless organization CEO who comes in and says, let's do it our way, we'll turn this failing school around. And what they do then is come in with these draconian, horrible, nasty rules. And then the community loses faith in that school, and then all of a sudden the staff turnover rate is exponentially high. Then you get more supply teachers coming in who don't know the community, don't know the schools, aren't invested in that. It's just a downward spiral. To use an economic and geographical term, it's called a negative multiplier effect. Things compound, get worse and get compound. Behavior gets worse, therefore more teachers leave. And when you look at the statistics of those schools, you're talking about higher absences rate from staff. You're talking about more staff with mental health problems. So those hardcore staff who are still in there, God bless them and fair play to them for sticking it out, are driven out as well by so many different factors. And then you're asking somebody to come in and replace that. They have to be themselves quite hardcore, quite driven. One last point about that is, with the changes in education, we're getting less people going into education who are intrinsically motivated towards wanting to change social mobility. If they turn education into just another job and another business, then that's what happens. This is what you do. You need people to want to go to a school like that and say, I'm going to go to a school like that and I'm going to rescue that school and I'm going to help these children. That is harder to do.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And I take your point, Brent, about, individuals wanting to go and teach in, schools that maybe aren't disadvantaged and so on. But, the best minds in education tell us that, a fundamental purpose of education really is to improve social justice. And therefore, maybe, the best teachers and teaching is needed in those disadvantaged schools. John, what is it really, that scares away teachers from disadvantaged schools? I mean, surely that's where the best teaching is needed.
Well, both those, yeah, absolutely. I mean, something drives teachers away from those schools. Brent talked about the negative multiplier. And yeah, of course, that we all know that's exactly where you need the best. I'm always hesitant about the word the best teachers. I think everyone has a potential to be a best teacher. Lots of people potential to be a best teacher, but never mind. They do need dedicated teachers of the kind Brent just described. The people that want to work there and believe in it. I'll share two anecdotes, which I think which pertain to this story. One, when I was at school, we had a science teacher announced to us. He was the teacher we all loved. He was a great guy, and we all thought he was wonderful. And he told us that he was leaving next term, and this was in the town of Crawley, Newtown in Sussex, and it had 3 big comprehensive schools. He was going to leave our school and go to the other school, which we felt a bit betrayed about. Actually, to be honest, why was our favourite teacher leaving? And he explained to us then what Brent just said, the negative multiplier. He said, there were 3 comprehensive schools built in this town. One has a reputation, one draws kids from a certain area, and the buildings have changed over time. They're all built at the same time, but things are happening to these 3 schools, and I'm moving down the road for an easier life because it's easier to teach there.
Yeah.
Well, that was half a century ago, so we should have known. It's kind of like that we would have thought we'd have devised some incredibly sophisticated funding method and compensatory system that would have encouraged teachers to teach in certain areas. The other anecdote, very briefly, is years and years later in another new town. I seem to have spent a lot of my life in new towns, Milton Keynes, where a school had a terrible reputation. I didn't teach this school. I wouldn't have taught this school. It's one of those schools you think, whoa, you'd have to be dedicated to teach there. Rough, difficult school. There was some land near it. They built a new school, brand new school next to the school, and demolished the old one. Changed the name, gave it new logos. Wow, it's a state-of-the-art school. Within no time at all, it was as bad as ever. It was absolutely as bad as ever. The kids had discovered that the wonderful new atrium with its shining walkways, you could very easy to spit down on the kids from above. They discovered this bad design. It was a shining walkway, but the kids found they subverted it. So walk to that school, and it was to be spat on fairly quickly. And in other words, sometimes resources and the application of quantities of resources don't always solve it. These problems are bigger than the education profession themselves can solve.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I saw a message from JBL on our screen there a moment ago, just something along the lines of, maybe there it is back up. Struggling schools often provide early opportunities for promotion. And a good point. But it is a good point. And you can take Brent's point. Individuals want to go somewhere where it's kind of perceived to be an easier life and so on. But to go somewhere else and really, really learn your craft with, some of the scrapes, the bumps and the bruises that come with it. Funny enough, I'm going to talk about Amanda Kinsley-Smith's show, and she talked to a young teacher about just exactly that, how you cope with difficulties and so on. Lucy, I've kind of held the hard question for you. What do we do? Is there a way out of the poverty and disadvantage cycle?
In terms of schools, or in terms of, the thing is, this is a societal problem. It's wider society. I think it's very easy to dump this on schools. And yes, schools are supposedly the pillars of their community, but they can't do that by themselves. They are at the moment putting so much energy into other things. Schools in poor areas are supplying breakfast clubs and things like that, hygiene supplies, uniform, food banks, all kinds of things like that. And they're only able to do it with support. And so it's very easy to say that it's schools' job to kind of lift these communities, to bring these communities back to life. But they can't do it by themselves. We all as teachers want to lift our communities, want to be those people, want to be those pillars of the communities ourselves. But it is an awful lot to bear on our shoulders without other people rallying around us, without other higher ups within the community, without these academy CEOs, without these people who are almost disconnected from what is really happening on the ground. And without that, and without them, if they're just sitting in their offices, sort of, with their feet on the desk going, not my problem, but it is your problem, and it's everybody's problem. It's not just school's problem.
Yeah. It's a topic we will return to undoubtedly in the future, but on to our next topic now. Now, the OECD released a report this week entitled Nurturing Social and Emotional Learning Across the Globe. And if you just indulge me a moment, I'll just read a little bit from the opening paragraphs. The report reveals striking disparities both within and between participating countries and subnational entities in how critical skills are fostered in schools, homes, and society. The findings offer insights into relationships between educational environments, student outcomes, and highlight the need for urgent improvements. Key recommendations are for enhancing school policies and practices, taking teachers' feedback, enhancing their training and their preparedness, attitudes, and so on. Lucy, social and emotional skills, attitudes, qualities include things like empathy, motivation, creativity, compassion, and so forth. What difference does it make to people when those kind of things are taught or required by young people? What difference does it make for them?
This is fundamental for me, and I think for many teachers, without these skills, and often they're relegated, and I'm talking again from my experience sort of in the UK and in European international schools, so it's limited. I can't talk for the world as a whole. I think that would be inappropriate. It's often relegated to kind of PSHE and sort of a cursory look or a bit of circle time here and there, and it's not treated as the fundamental principles that they are, having empathy, learning to, and I struggle with the word tolerance, but all these kind of basic things about being in a community, being in society, being in your little mini society in your classroom, understanding those around you, being aware of those around you. These are absolutely fundamental things before any other learning can take place, before any else. This should be the baseline, the benchmark. This should be what is underpinning everything we do as teachers, from the moment those little dots walk through the door, aged 4, to all the way through, even into university. These skills of kind of understanding, being around each other and understanding each other. You look at what's going on in the world, and without kind of going too dark, so much of it is to do with lack of understanding, is to do with not being, and I'm not saying we can solve the world's problems, but I am saying that we need to be at a very, very basic level, at a very, very base level, starting with this, not kind of adding it on. I don't know if that really sort of answers the question, but to me, this is all the wrong way around.
Well, I think it does, Lucy. And I mean, one of the things I always say is, those qualities, those social, those personal qualities, that empathy, that compassion, that grit, that determination. I know Brett always talks about Carol Dweck and so on. To me, those things are the tide that raises all the boat. Wouldn't we all love, in our history, science, geography, wouldn't we love children to be confident, enterprising, capable, self-reliant, and imagine what it would do to our results? I mean, I think it would be fantastic. Do you know what I mean? But one of the issues I have, and Brent, if I could come to you, is, as Lucy's pointed out, these things are kind of bolted on. They're not in the curriculum, yet they're fundamental. It's a bit of a lottery. If you are lucky enough to have teachers who value these things and spend time on them, you might be lucky. Is that personal and social education taken seriously in this country?
No, and it's not taken seriously by parents either, and that's the problem. It's not taken seriously by society. So I think schools do a better job than some of society does at the moment. Consider the lack of empathy, the lack of understanding coming from leadership in the last couple of years during COVID, after COVID, the hostile, aggressive nature. We talk about misogyny. We could teach one way at school and then say to the children, this is the way it is. And then they go home to a completely different environment. So I think we're undermined. I think I've never been so empathetic. I mean, tell me I don't teach empathy when I'm doing things like the Holocaust, or in geography I'm doing about flooding. Massively, try and empathize and try and help understand. And I think kids are naturally very good at things like that. I think kids are better than adults. I think and social media accentuates that, de-educates these children. So I think there's an element of, I think schools do a good job because we know it's part of our job. It's that thing that we do that defines us as teachers, as role models, as guardians of good manners. Being a teacher sometimes means you are that person that sometimes says no to a child when all they keep hearing is yes and entitlement, and they look at you funny. You're sort of weirdo. I mean, I had a kid turn around to me this week and call me a weirdo because I use good manners, like please and thank you. And I thought, am I the only person in his life that literally is saying this is the way things are? I mean, so that's the thing. Schools can only mirror and reflect what society's doing, and unless it's a society top to bottom, and I don't feel like we have, John Major's Back to Basics in the 1990s, where you had this whole idea of good family values and politicians saying we should all role model that. It's not just about that. It's always on us. It always seems to be us. And I'm sick and tired of media and everybody saying, what are they teaching them at schools? We have the children 190 days for 6 hours. So what can we do in those 190 days and 6 hours? Already, every man and his dog is saying, let's teach this at school. Let's teach that at school. They need to define what it is our job and our role to be. If they want us to parent children, then go on ahead. Give me the responsibility of parenting children and I'll have a go at it. Absolutely, I'm parenting my own children because that's my responsibility. My responsibility to teach my child that emotional intelligence. That's where it starts. And if it doesn't start at home and it doesn't start within the community, then we may basically just be saying one thing that completely gets undermined as soon as that child walks out that door.
And I think you're absolutely right. We very often are that little island where that child comes out of society onto the island with us. As you say, it's for 6 hours a day. It's 190 days in the year. And we do all those things. We model empathy, we teach empathy, compassion, and so on and so forth. But you're absolutely right. None of those things is listed in the curriculum, and none of those things are listed in our job descriptions, but really, really expected from us. And there's a lot of teacher bashing when community fails and the spotlight goes on us. John, following directly on from that, one of the things the survey is very keen to point out is that very few teachers provide social and emotional learning. In fact, they say it's an area of concern for them. They feel they don't have experience. They're poorly trained in all of this. What can we do to enhance teachers' confidence and capability in social and emotional learning?
Goodness, I wish I knew. It's such a big one, because as Lucy says, ironically, it's the beginning and the end of teaching. It's what we all went into teaching to do. This is how we describe what we do when we are in a, when we've had a glass of wine on Christmas and we're talking about our careers. This is what we decide. This is what we went to do. We're feeling a bit warm and fuzzy. This is why we went into teaching. So this is the beginning and the end of it. And yet it isn't the actual experience. You're right. It's often a poster on the wall. It's an assembly that covers that tick box exercise and so on. But it is the essential of what we do. This is described in this report. But how we do it is because I like, Paul, your idea of this, a quiet area, sort of space. It's as if, though, we are in schools in the eye of a storm. Because in the school, especially younger kids, in primary schools, you often get this. Kids are intensely aware of unfairness, injustice. They can't see often the differences between the colour of kids' skins. They have very little idea of those things. And yet, as time goes by, society, the storm that's raging around about, they have to go out into that world, and that world encroaches increasingly in on them. And Lucy didn't want to get dark about this, but I will get dark about this. How can you maintain those human values that we all believe in this world? It's very, very difficult, and I don't know that we can that easily deal with it. And we're continually expected to deal in the face of a storm which throws at them values of marketization, values of neoliberalism, values of selfishness, values of intense self-reliance. And in a world, if the human race were a single individual, it would be definitely very psychopathic right now. And yet we, in that world, a very bleak sort of world, I'm afraid, to be very existentialist about this, are a little island, hopefully an island of calm and sensible human values. And why can't teachers always do this? Why are you looking to schools and say, why aren't teachers doing this? Why aren't we making this the center of things? It's because of all the other demands on the schools. You've got to fix kids so they're great workers in the economy. You've got to get great results. You've got to worry about Ofsted. So I don't blame teachers for thinking, well, in the end, I've got it. My kids must get good grades. And I must show progress over progress 8. And those are the data-driven, non-humane things that have changed our schools.
Yeah. We are very much led by the nose to do certain things, and that, social and emotional learning and so on is almost like a byproduct. Yeah. I see JBL is commenting again. He's a little bit ahead of me because I wanted to ask very quickly, and it will have to be very quick answer, panelists. Can social and emotional skills, attitudes, quality, all those things we talked about there, the compassion, the empathy, the self-reliance and so on, can they be taught successfully, or are they things that are more caught than taught? Lucy?
It's both for me. I think that you have to, I think explicitly teaching perhaps not, but I think if you are modeling it, embodying that, showing examples of that, filling your teaching with absolute, how to be empathetic, how to do those things, then yes, I think you can teach it, but I also do think you have to live it as a teacher as well.
John, what about you?
Yes, let teachers be the teachers they want to be. And you will get, as JBL commented there, you don't need to teach. You just need to be empathetic to show empathy, to teach empathy. You need to be fair to teach fairness. However, if you're at the kind of school where at the moment the kids have to walk rigidly one way down the corridor and the other way down the corridor and track the teacher with their eyes, that isn't teaching anything that we want in this world.
Brent, what about you? Caught or taught?
Both. I think nature and nurture on that one. Psychologists have a field day. I think some people have a more greater propensity to be more empathetic, and others can learn it through experience and through modeling and through teaching. Because why else are we there for? If we didn't believe we can actually educate and redeem and teach, then everything we're doing is completely pointless. But it's easier for some than easier for the others, and it's easier in some contexts and some settings than it is in others. And I think you need a different set of tools for a different set of children, even a different age. And I think that's where the training comes in, is knowing the right sort of method to apply to the right child. And that comes with experience. And our problem is we're losing lots of that experience within education. And what's replacing those isn't of the same nature that values these things, because they have been standardized, league tabled-ized, and don't see it as a job of a teacher. And I think we need to go back to that. What is the job and role of a teacher? And what are we in society? And that links to our next story, doesn't it, really, when I think about it? Because it is my job to look after the children, to help them, to nurture them, to grow them. And I think you get better exam results that way. Ironically, I think you get more success. I'd equate it the same as like a football manager, isn't it? You've got to create the culture that you want to see in the children. However, you don't have that born in some people. That has to come with a bit of experience and time.
I think you're absolutely right in that, yes. And this topic always leads me into that whole area of ethos and the climate and the feel of the school and so on. And if you follow your football, you will know that your Manchester Uniteds, Liverpools, and so on, they're very big on that whole business of, the climate and the culture of the club and so on, and very quick to kind of move in and fix parts of it and so on. Unfortunately, that's all we've time for on this topic today. Now, on to our last story. Fabulous headline: why we should change pessimistic narratives around teaching. And we can get into a bit of a cycle of doom and gloom. And, the ethos out there is for teacher bashing, and we kind of revolt. We are poorly paid. Our conditions are dreadful. There's a perception that teaching is not an attractive profession, that it's riddled with problems. There's behavior issues, underachievement, standards are never met. John, outline the reality for us. It cannot be like that all the time. Otherwise, we should all get out, shouldn't we?
Yes, well, because you've just come to me after I've painted an existential horror in which schools are a beacon of lonely...
We like a bit of juxtaposition.
Lonely islands of civilization. So I don't know how I can dig my way out of that one, other than to say that, you have to. The article does suggest that you have to be honest about the problems schools face. On the other hand, there can be a problem with recruiting teachers, as we talked about earlier, if they feel that is all they ever hear is how dreadful it is and how difficult the world is and so on. I don't think you can talk schools up if they're not talk upable. There has to be a reality to the teaching. And I'm happy to tell anyone who is, I don't know, we've all had this probably, people say to you, well, I'm thinking of becoming, you meet some young person who says, I'm thinking of becoming a teacher. What do you then say? Well, I always say something positive, that is actually, I've had a wonderful career in teaching, and then most of it I enjoyed, notwithstanding what I said before. And so it is possible to talk up teaching. However, you have to be clear-eyed about what it is. Also, I think that the other thing is that there are many narratives surrounding teaching. It's probably the most discourse-related profession in the world. I think we, especially in Britain, we talk about it in terms of social control, of class, of declining things ain't what they used to be, of the world is in some sort of difficulty and so on, and teachers must solve that problem. So we have, I think, surrounded teaching with a fog of different discourses driven by different political and ideological viewpoints. And I'm guilty of that, of course, myself.
I've heard
so it's difficult in some ways to unpick the reality.
Yeah, I've heard Brent say it before, and he may say it again today, but we're an easy target because we are compassionate, we have these outlooks on people, and we are very good at defending and promoting children, maybe less so at kind of defending and promoting ourselves. And when we do it, it can sound a bit yappy, can it, Lucy?
Yeah.
Does it sound a bit, do we contribute to our own kind of sense of...
Yes, and I had to kind of swallow down a deep sense of irritation when I actually read this article originally, and I thought, have I misinterpreted this? Have I kind of, because, well, of course we have to change the language around teaching, and a lot of it actually, some of it is perpetuated by us, yes, but not without kind of reason to. There's a lot that's gone on, whether it's been the state of the buildings, the pay, behavior, I mean, a litany of things, but also particularly, and I'm going to use the COVID example because it's an easy one to refer to, but there are many where, well, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. You're not, and we didn't pick up the slack fast enough after you went back to school. So there are other people or other kind of aspects in the frame here. Yes, I do think, we do get sucked into a sort of doom wormhole, but I also think we are constantly bombarded with absolute nonsense that we're then told is our fault, but not kind of given any sort of shining light or anything to kind of strive for or feel better about. So I suppose my infuriation with this comes from yes, of course the language needs to change, but throw us a bone here, help us out.
Yeah. Brent, you're a man who's known for never going on a rant or anything like that. What needs to happen for teaching to be seen as more optimistic and appealing?
Right. Well, first of all, teachers have got to stop bullying each other. We did a story about the Sky News expose, teacher on teacher abuse, edu-Twitter. Stop it. Stop it. Stop adding to the fuel in the fire. Support your colleagues, support the profession, and stop undermining fellow colleagues. You may disagree with them, but stop it.
Oh, Brent, there's something going on with your microphone there, Brent.
Yeah. Sometimes teachers think they're always right, all right? We need to sometimes listen to each other, and we need sometimes help each other. And I think that too often there is people digging little ideological holes and pedagogical holes and saying, I'm right, you're wrong. And unfortunately, that feeds into the narrative. I think government itself needs to look at public services. If I asked nurses, I asked doctors, I asked police, I asked all those public services how they're perceived with the general public, there's a definite erosion of public service and people who are public service workers. And that's happened over the last generation because they've just been undermined, underfunded, completely criticized, thrown under the bus. And the narrative now is it's almost being done on purpose. They want to destroy public sector workers. So don't, as a teacher, give them the opportunity to destroy our profession because you are playing into their hands when you destroy our profession. It's a noble profession. It's a brilliant profession. It's one of the greatest professions in the world, but we have to make it ourselves. We've got to stand up for ourselves. We've got to stand up those who attack teachers, not join in. When you see a fellow professional getting attacked, you defend the profession. You defend the children. You defend your school. You defend what you signed up for. You do not join in. And that's a message I have as a union representative, as a politician, and as a teacher. I am tired and sick of it, of watching edu-Twitter and the negativity that is driven by teachers themselves and ideological Puritans. They've got to stop because they are not helping one bit. And even people on this show sometimes get it because we stick our necks out. We stick our necks out. And as a result of sticking your neck out and having the courage to stick your neck out, you get absolutely shot down. And that is, I have no problem interviewing people like Catherine Burble saying, I don't always agree with Catherine, but she's a head teacher. She deserves my respect. I don't agree with her politically. I disagree with some of her views, but I respect the fact that she's a head teacher in a school. I may not like what she does in her school, but I am not condemning her. And there's too many people who have opinions just based upon their own ideological background, and they need to stop doing that. So that's my rant this morning.
We need to get out.
Very good rant.
Yeah,
very
very
good
good.
rant. Sometimes rants are needed and very worthwhile. Just on Brent's point there, I think somewhere in the pipeline, Brent and I are hoping to speak to some of those teachers who are bullied. We are able to offer anonymity as well. If you would like to get in contact with us, we would like to build a program around teachers who are being bullied. That's all we've time for on that topic today. Now, shows of the week. I already mentioned Amanda Kinsley-Smith's show. That's the Sunday Late Show last week, when Amanda spoke to a delightfully enthusiastic Shauna Blaine. I'm just realizing what an advert for the profession. I really think everybody should listen to that show. Shauna is in her third year out. She's so keen, so enthusiastic, fantastic voice. And they talked about the benefits and pitfalls of getting out of your comfort zone. Now, Amanda has that great relaxed kind of style. Her shows are always full of anecdotes, and there's that kind of fun empathy. She draws great information out of her guests. Great show for people like me who have forgotten their early days. Scars are still there, but forgotten them. And who occasionally are asked to go out and to do observations of, maybe student teachers, early career teachers and all. It's good to be put back in that position. Remember, there's a huge self-consciousness, for example, and Shauna tells a great story about that. I think it's a must listen for early career and student teachers. Shauna is absolutely exemplary in her attitude to challenges and just how she grows, gains, and develops from them all. That's my kind of rant. I go on those kind of positive sort of rants. Oh, I don't know who's that. Oh, John, have you listened to anything good this week on TTR?
I have. I've listened to the Late Show, Dave Brown's Late Show, which
he talked about Ofsted, didn't he?
He did. It was the history of Ofsted. Now, I know that if anyone's listening to this thinking, the history of Ofsted, that'd be like hearing a show on the Boris Johnson special hour or something. How quickly can you get to the off switch? But actually, the Ofsted, a history of Ofsted was stunning. And again, as you said, Paul, I recommend this as must listen to any teacher who has had any kind of career where I recognize a lot of this developments through time, because he took from 1978 through to the 1929 now, really, of the changes that Ofsted wrought and the changes that Ofsted were part of through education, from the days of when I can remember very liberal education schools through to now, and the effects of Ofsted and so on. So that was fascinating, going down through history. And the second part of the discussion was very much on how Ofsted, teachers, killing the myth that teachers aren't against inspections of any kind. They're not against accountability, but you can do it differently and you can do it better. And so this is a chap who is named Dr. Ian Luff, who'd done a PhD in the history and development of Ofsted, and a wonderful piece of research and really well worth listening to.
Super duper, yeah. Lucy, what have you been listening to?
Well, continuing the theme of great role models in teaching, and hopefully ending this whole we've gone over a half hour, but this whole weekly review, I listened to Toria Bono's show that she did alongside Tom Rogers, and she interviewed a fantastic teacher called Shelley Cousins, and they were talking about well-being and how to get through the autumn term, because I always find that certainly the October to Christmas term is the hardest part, but just that kind of, once the sort of novelty of the school year has worn off, it can kind of it's a long run to Christmas, even though we are on half term now. But what was nice about listening to Shelley is her absolute incredible enthusiasm for her subject, for, you know, even talking about kind of just putting herself in her office for a couple of hours and planning her lessons and thinking about what she's going to do next, and just listening to someone who had nothing but positive things to say, but also did acknowledge that there are things that, you know, make teachers that tire them out, and that there are things we need to do to ensure our well-being. So if you're looking for a little bit of a boost in terms of how you feel about teaching at the moment, it's a thoroughly recommended listen. So that's Toria Bono's show called Wellbeing, How Do We Survive the Autumn Term? And it was the Sunday Social, I believe.
Super duper. Brent, what have you been listening to?
Well, ironically, reading. So it's Darren Lester's as part 2. So this comes as a set. So I'd recommend if you listen to the second part, maybe listen to the first part. So it was this Saturday lunchtime show or morning show, and it was about the intrinsic motivation behind reading and reading for pleasure. And he did the first one he did about the neuroscience of why it's important to read. The second one is obviously then into the pedagogy and how do we get the children to read more, and how do we get that more intrinsic motivation, and based upon some of the educational research going on at the moment. So it was really good listening, because I think it's one of the most vital things we're facing at the moment is the children not wanting to read. And I know our school is trying all sorts of ideas, including me reading to the children for an hour. And one of the good things we've done is, which matches what Darren was saying, is getting the book that's right for the right children. You know, not they get enough literature stuff, but if you're going to read stuff for pleasure, it's the sci-fi, it's the stuff that the kids are into. So pitching the books correctly to the right child can be massively important, and also creating time. So creating time for reading in an environment where the world now is time poor, and yet reading is that vitally important. But how do we create that time? So it's well worth a listen for anybody who's into literacy reading, or even reading themselves. And I think that's Darren Lester's part 1 and part 2. Part 2 was last Saturday, and I think part 1 was 2 weeks earlier.
Fantastic shows on TTR recently. Really super stuff. It's like free CPD. One of the things I wanted to ask you all was, you know, would it be good if teachers had, you know, like a figurehead, somebody famous who could kind of, you know, carry the flag for the profession? But what I've realized is that the Weekly Review has its very own figurehead, and that, of course, is JBL. Leanne, could we put up JBL? There it is. JBL tells us, let someone else blow teacher's trumpet. It will sound twice as sweet and travel further. Today's panelists are brilliant adverts for this profession. And, of course, in utter modesty, I can only agree with him. And that's all we've time for this week. Let us know if you've enjoyed the show, and let us know what you think of the panelists. Thank you very much to our sponsors, John Catt Books and Reading Solutions. Thank you to the panel, John, Brent, Lucy, and to Leanne in production in the background. If you're off this week, have a brilliant time. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.